Hello, my aqua friends. I'm so glad you're here, and happy Halloween month. It's October. My name is Nicole Cordemosh, and we are in the Halloween spirit today. I have a very spooky forest for you. So let me run through my setup with you. I used Hahnemuhl watercolor paper, some tape to tape down my paper, of course, and I used Peruvian blue, leaf green, sap green, burnt sienna, shadow green, and neutral tint. I used masking fluid, a pencil and eraser to draw my sketch. I like to use a flat 3/4 angle brush and various round brushes. I love the black silver series. I do have a link in the description below. I did use a script liner brush as well, and I always have a lifting brush handy in case I needed it. So starting off with our first layer, wet on wet watercolor technique, I am wetting the paper just in the areas where I'm going to be putting those lightest forest colors. Starting off, of course, with my leaf green and then adding in the sap green and those little punches of the burnt sienna, those little bits of orange that I see in the forest. I'm going for a little bit of different texture on the forest floor with my shadow green and my script liner brush. Then I'm trying to rush along the drying time a little bit with a heat tool. You could also use a blow dryer just to make sure that your paper is very, very dry before you put on your masking fluid. So I'm using a soapy brush that helps to protect your bristles when you're using masking fluid, and I do suggest that you use an old brush. And I'm randomly tapping in some just organic shapes and marks over the foliage area that I just laid down. Now again, it has to be completely dry. Do not use a heat tool to dry up the process of masking fluid, or you'll never get the masking fluid off. Just let that dry really well before you start your next layer. I'm adding in my light rays with the Peruvian blue, and then I'm building up the darker values using my shadow green. And while the paper is still wet, I'm also adding in the tree trunks. It has a very soft effect, as you can see, because the paper is still wet. So I'm getting those main shapes in. And with my script liner brush, I'm also adding in some branch effects in that background. Because the paper is wet, it dries softly, it's out of focus and fuzzy, and it's just going to look really cool, and it's going to have a very three-dimensional look when we do add more layers. And we will, of course, be making some of these trees more in focus. With each layer I'm doing, you could see that I'm letting the paper dry. So once that layer is dry, I'm coming in using wet on dry watercolor technique, and I'm putting in those main trees and the branches with my script liner brush. Now to soften the tree trunks and have it blend in with these dark rays, just take a damp, clean brush to blend it out with the bottom part of the forest. So a fun part here is taking a damp script liner brush like I'm doing and dragging it onto the main tree in the foreground here, and you can see that it's making these light areas. It's like we're lifting paint off there, and it's giving me some cool bark textures. Once that layer dries, I'm coming in with my neutral tint and I am wetting the area so that I could blend out those dark rays. Sort of making it a lot darker towards the borders of the painting, and of course having it lighter closer to the light source. So each layer we're building up values, and we're doing that slowly so that it does have a really nice depth perception. So it's still pretty wet, and as you can see, I'm still dropping in darker and darker colors. Squint at your reference photo, decide how dark you want your darks to be. If you want to let more light in and lighten up the scene, then you could do that as well. I didn't go as dark as the reference photo. I wanted to have that light shining through to be very eye-catching. I am using a damp, flat 3/4 inch brush to drag paint while it's still damp and lift that paint off to make these light rays. Look at how beautiful that effect is. You could also use a tissue to lift even more paint. Once that whole thing dries, now's the time to remove the masking fluid. So I make sure that I remove all of that masking fluid. And as you can see, there is a huge contrast. It's way too harsh and it looks not very good. So in order to soften this effect, I mean, I'm still happy with it, don't get me wrong. It's just we need to do a little bit more work here by softening the effect using a watery mixture of your neutral tint and going over some of those areas and adding in more organic branches and forest textures to soften those, but still have that light shining through. So I will go over all of those areas and the forest ground and continue with my neutral tint and adding in these random textures to blend in that first layer that we worked on. For adding the Frankenstein figure, I'm using neutral tint in a pretty thick consistency with my number 4 round brush. And the top part of him is darker than the bottom half of him because of the light rays going across his body. So I'm painting it in this effect too. I'm sort of running out of paint towards the bottom part of his body, which is a good thing because it's given me that effect of the light going across his body, and I don't want him to look just like a solid silhouette. I want him to have a bit of form. The final touches are making some of the trees darker in areas and a bit more branch details with my script liner brush and details on the bark. of the foreground tree. Do you guys like to paint Halloween theme paintings? Let me know in the comments below. And if you would like to make another Halloween inspired painting that has some really cool branch effects made with plastic wrap, then click on this video here to see how I made this cool effect. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to my channel if you enjoy my artwork, and I'll see you guys next week.